I thought I was married to a loving and devoted woman. It turned out she had been using me as a backup option for years while waiting for her real, perfect man to propose to her. She was going to leave me with nothing, but she didn't know that I already knew about her plan. And my revenge wasn't just beautiful, it was flawless. I met Emily 10 years ago at a charity fundraiser in Boston. She stood across the room, captivating everyone with her infectious laugh and confident presence. Her dark hair cascaded down her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and charm. When our eyes met, I felt something I hadn't experienced before, a connection that seemed predestined. "You've been staring at me for 15 minutes, she said when she finally approached me. "I figured I should save you the trouble and introduce myself." That night, we talked until the venue staff politely asked us to leave. Emily was everything I had ever wanted: brilliant, charismatic, ambitious. She worked as a marketing executive for a luxury brand, and her stories about client interactions and office politics had me hanging on every word. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. The wedding was perfect, a small ceremony in Cape Cod with close friends and family. Everyone told us we were the ideal couple. I believed it too. We bought a beautiful colonial house in a quiet suburb of Boston. I worked as a financial analyst, and though the hours were long, the money was good. Emily continued her marketing career, but about 3 years into our marriage, something changed. "I'm just so tired of the corporate grind," she said one evening over dinner. "The politics, the pressure, it's suffocating me." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Maybe you should take some time off. Figure out what you really want to do." "Could we afford that?" she asked, her eyes brightening. "We'd have to tighten our belts a bit, but your happiness matters more than money," I replied. And so it began. Emily reduced her hours, then eventually quit altogether. She talked about starting her own consulting business, but months passed with little progress. I took on more clients, worked longer hours, trying to maintain our lifestyle. I wanted to support her journey to happiness, whatever that looked like. "You're the best husband a woman could ask for," she'd say, kissing me on the cheek before I left for work at dawn. I'd return home late to find takeout containers in the trash and Emily already asleep, or pretending to be. The first signs were subtle. Emily became attached to her phone, angling the screen away when I entered the room. Our conversations grew shorter, more superficial. Date nights became rare, then non-existent. "We should go out this weekend," I suggested one Thursday night. "That new Italian place downtown looks amazing." "Oh, I can't," she said without looking up from her phone. Girls' night with Melissa and Kate. Girls' nights became increasingly frequent. When I asked about her friends, her answers were vague, lacking the vivid details that once colored her stories. One night, she came home at midnight, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. "Had fun?" I asked casually. "Yeah, just drinks and dancing. Nothing special." She headed straight for the shower. I tried talking to her about the distance growing between us. "Is everything okay with us? You seem elsewhere lately." She rolled her eyes. "You're just being paranoid." "I'm fine, we're fine. I've just been focused on myself lately." "Don't you want me to be happy?" That question, manipulative and dismissive, became her shield against any real conversation. I wasn't paranoid. My gut screamed that something was wrong, but I ignored it, burying myself in work and hoping it was just a phase. Until the day I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was a Tuesday morning. Emily had supposedly gone for an early yoga class, but I knew she hadn't taken her yoga mat. I was working from home that day, catching up on some reports in the dining room when I heard her laptop ping from the kitchen counter. I had never invaded Emily's privacy before. We had always respected each other's space. But the growing knot in my stomach propelled me toward her computer. The screen lit up, displaying a series of new message notifications from someone named Brian. My finger hovered over the trackpad. This was the moment. I could close the laptop and continue living in denial, or I could face whatever truth waited inside. I clicked. What I found shattered my world into a million pieces. "Can't wait to see you again," Brian had written. "Last night was amazing. You're incredible." I scrolled up, each message driving the knife deeper. Photos of them together at restaurants, at a cabin upstate, on a beach that I didn't recognize. Emily's responses were worse than his messages. "You're my real man, Brian. I can't believe I wasted so many years with him. I'm so happy you finally proposed. I've been waiting for this moment. Just a little longer and I can divorce him. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half of everything, the house, investments, retirement accounts. You and I can finally start our life together." I kept scrolling, back through months, then years of messages. Their affair hadn't been going on for months. It had been 3 years. More than half our marriage. 3 years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Brian was encouraging her, "You deserve everything you can get from that loser. Bleed him dry, baby." My hands trembled as I dug deeper. There were detailed discussions about their future home, which they planned to buy with my money. Vacation plans. Even talks about children, something Emily had always told me she wasn't ready for. I discovered that Emily had been secretly consulting with a divorce attorney for months, strategizing how to maximize her financial gain from our split. They had planned it all meticulously. She would file for divorce after my year-end bonus hit our joint account. I sat frozen at the kitchen counter, time losing all meaning as the magnitude of the betrayal sank in. My wife of 7 years hadn't just fallen out of love with me, she had been actively plotting my financial and emotional destruction while living off my income and sleeping in my bed. But as the initial shock subsided, something else emerged, a cold, calculated clarity. If Emily wanted to play games, she had severely underestimated her opponent. I carefully took screenshots of the most damning conversations, saving them to a secure cloud account. Then I closed her laptop exactly as I'd found it and made a phone call. Richard Thompson's office, a receptionist answered. "This is David Mitchell. I need to speak with Richard as soon as possible. It's urgent." Richard was the best divorce attorney in Boston, known for his strategic brilliance and uncompromising approach. His services were expensive, but I knew this would be the best money I'd ever spent. That afternoon, while Emily was still out with her yoga friends, I sat in Richard's office explaining my situation. "You did the right thing coming to me first," Richard said after reviewing the screenshots. "Many people in your position confront their spouse immediately, which gives them time to hide assets or fabricate accusations. What's my next move?" I asked. Richard leaned forward. "First, we need to protect your assets. The good news is that the house is solely in your name, which gives us leverage. But we need to move quickly with the rest." Under Richard's guidance, I opened new individual bank accounts and began transferring funds from our joint accounts, leaving just enough to avoid raising immediate suspicion. I changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance and retirement accounts. I gathered all our financial records and secured them off-site. "What about proof of the affair?" Richard asked. "I have the messages, but is that enough?" "It helps, but we should get more. I'll put you in touch with a private investigator." The PI confirmed what I already knew. Emily and Brian met 3 or 4 times a week at his downtown apartment. He provided photos, videos, and a detailed timeline of their relationship that would destroy any claim of recent dissatisfaction on Emily's part. Meanwhile, I maintained an Oscar-worthy performance at home. I left for work at the same time, brought home flowers occasionally, and never once let on that I knew my marriage was a sham. Emily continued her charade as well, though her absences grew longer and her excuses thinner. "Sales conference in Chicago this weekend," she announced one Thursday, already packing her overnight bag. Chicago was convenient, Brian had mentioned taking her to his family's lake house in Wisconsin. "Have a great time," I said, kissing her cheek. "Bring me back one of those caramel popcorn tubs I love." The pieces were in place. Richard confirmed we were legally protected, the PI had compiled an irrefutable dossier of evidence, and I had even quietly secured a new apartment for myself, paid 6 months in advance with cash. I waited for Emily to make her move. It came exactly as I had anticipated. She returned from her Chicago trip with a determined look in her eyes. We sat at our kitchen island that evening, her hands wrapped around a glass of wine I had poured. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice measured in a way that suggested rehearsal. "About us, about our future." I nodded encouragingly. "I think." She paused, perfecting her pained expression. "I think we should take some time apart. This isn't working anymore." "You want a divorce?" I asked directly. Her eyes widened slightly, she hadn't expected me to jump to the conclusion so quickly. She nodded, a calculated sadness washing over her features. "It's not that I don't care about you," she continued. "We've just grown so far apart. I barely recognize us anymore." I took a long sip of my wine, savoring the moment. "I understand completely." She blinked, thrown off balance by my calm acceptance. You do." "Of course. When something's over, it's over." I reached beside me and pulled out a folder. "That's why I took the liberty of drafting these." I slid the divorce papers across the island. Emily stared at them, confusion replacing her rehearsed grief. You already prepared divorce papers?" "I like to be efficient," I replied with a shrug. "I've always admired that about you too, Emily. Your efficiency." She flipped through the documents, her confusion deepening as she reached the asset division section. "This says the house remains with you." "That's not right. I'm entitled to half." "Actually, if you look at the deed, you'll notice the house has always been solely in my name. We discussed adding you years ago, but you said the paperwork seemed like a hassle. Remember?" Her face paled as realization began to dawn. She flipped more frantically through the pages. "And these bank accounts, these numbers can't be right." "They're correct," I said, pouring myself more wine. "Those accounts reflect the current balances. But where's the rest?" Her voice rose. "Our joint savings had over $200,000 last month." "Did it?" "I moved most of my money to individual accounts last week. Financial advisors recommend separating assets before major life changes. Just being practical." Emily's composure cracked. "You can't do this. I'm entitled to half of everything." "Half of everything we built together, perhaps," I agreed. "But as these records show," I slid another folder toward her, "I've been the primary breadwinner for the past 4 years. You've contributed almost nothing to our household income since you quit your job." "That was your idea," she snapped. "You encouraged me to find myself." "And did you find yourself?" I asked calmly, pulling out my phone. I placed it on the counter between us and pressed play on an audio file. Brian's voice filled the kitchen. "Just string him along a little longer, baby. Once we get the house money, we can start looking at places in San Diego." Emily's voice followed, I know. It's just hard pretending I still care about him. He's so needy, always wanting to talk about our relationship. Just a few more months and we're free." The color drained from Emily's face. "You've been spying on me," she whispered. "No." I met her eyes directly. "You left your laptop open that day you claimed to be at yoga. Technology can be so revealing, don't you think?" Emily stood suddenly, her wine glass toppling over, red liquid spreading across our white countertop like blood. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Brian and I." "Ah yes, Brian," I interrupted. "Your perfect man. Your real future. He seems quite invested in my money, doesn't he? I wonder how invested he'll be now that there isn't any. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it, reading the message with widening eyes. Problems? I asked innocently. She didn't answer, frantically typing a response, then another, and another. I knew without looking what was happening. Brian was cutting his losses. The dream of financing their new life with my hard-earned money had just evaporated. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings from my house, I said, standing up. Anything left behind will be donated to charity. Oh, and Emily. The locks will be changed tomorrow morning. I walked upstairs to the guest bedroom where I'd been secretly sleeping for weeks, leaving her standing in the kitchen, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. Emily alternated between rage, tears, and desperate negotiation attempts. I remained calm, immovable. Brian never showed up to help her move. Apparently, his apartment was too small for all her things, and his enthusiasm for their relationship had cooled considerably once the financial windfall disappeared. On the final day, as Emily loaded the last of her designer clothes into her car, she tried one last approach. We could try again, she suggested, her voice soft and reminiscent of the woman I'd fallen in love with. I made a terrible mistake, but people deserve second chances, don't they? What we had was real, at the beginning. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but a distant pity. The beginning ended 3 years ago, Emily. Have a good life. As her car disappeared down our tree-lined street, I should have felt triumphant. I had outmaneuvered her, protected myself from financial ruin, and exposed her betrayal. Yet as I stood in our empty driveway, my driveway, victory felt hollow. Weeks passed. Through mutual friends, I heard that Emily had moved to a small apartment across town. Brian had indeed broken things off. Her carefully curated social media presence had gone quiet. I sold the house, too many memories haunted its rooms, and moved into a modern downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of the city. I took a long overdue vacation to Japan, something Emily had always vetoed in favor of beach resorts. I dated casually, enjoying the freedom of authentic connections without manipulation. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Emily. You won, it read simply. You destroyed everything I planned, everything I thought I wanted. The irony is that losing it all made me realize what I really had with you: security, respect, partnership. Things I took for granted. Things Brian never really offered. I'm not asking for reconciliation or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your revenge worked better than you could have imagined. I have to live with the knowledge that I destroyed the one genuine relationship in my life for a fantasy that evaporated the moment it was tested. Congratulations. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. There was no satisfaction in her suffering, no joy in her regret. The perfect revenge had left me victorious but strangely empty. That night, standing at my window overlooking the glittering city lights, I realized the final truth about revenge: it doesn't heal the wounds of betrayal, it just balances the scales of justice. Emily had lost everything she schemed for, but I had lost something too, the belief that love could be trusted implicitly. Yet as I watched the city below, teeming with millions of individual lives and countless second chances, I felt something unexpected stir within me: not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first hint of freedom from the past. Perfect revenge had served its purpose. Now it was time to discover what might lie beyond it.